So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to actually start creating posts. We've talked a lot about the blog so far, but we haven't actually really got to it. So we're going to create a div class equals posts container. And now this is going to represent a container that is invisible that will contain all of our posts. And then inside the post container, we'll have div class equals post container. So this is the individual post. So if there was like 5 posts, there would be like that. So we need to think about what's going to be in our post. So the first thing that might display might be the name. So we'd have like p class equals post name. And then for now, I'll just put colon. And then underneath of it, we'll have class equals post content. And maybe we'll just type in, this is a really cool post. And then let's refresh our page. Okay, so we have our post, but it's not quite how we want it to be. So first of all, we're going to make the background a different color so that you can tell it's a post. So I'm just going to pick the first one. And then we don't want it to take up the entire screen. So what if we gave it a width of like 50%? Okay, but now it's touching the left side and the top, which looks a little bit clunky. So what if we went back to our posts container and set margin top to be like 1%, which would move it away. We can bring that to 2, and we'll have margin left to be 2% as well. Cool. So then if we go back to our post, we're going to give it a border radius of 10 pixels. What that's going to do is make it round. Now it's a little hard to tell, so we're going to go to our body and go to background color and change it to light gray. So now we can see our post pretty well. So I sort of like the look of it, but one thing that we're going to want to do is make sure that there's space between the top and left and right. So we're going to give it a padding left of maybe like 10 pixels, maybe a little more. 15 is fine. So then we're going to give it a padding right so that it's the same on the other side. And then we're going to go padding top. I don't know if 15 pixels will work, but probably a little bit less. So maybe 10. And then padding bottom of 10 pixels. It's a little much too. We'll leave it at 10 for now. I think it's because, yeah, so these have a margin. So we're going to remove the margin from here. Cool, so that's looking a little bit better. Now I don't like that this is so bland. So let's give it a font size of like 18 pixels. No. Let's go up to 24 pixels. Maybe we'll give it a font dash weight bold, but that might be a little bit too much. You can select how bold you want. Then we're going to go down to our next one. We're going to give that a font size of 18 pixels. Maybe make it a little bigger. Let's go to 20. 20 looks good. Okay, so we have created a post. But remember, if we refresh our page right now, all of this is gone because we're editing this in here. So we need to add this to our CSS. So similar to how we created a new JavaScript file, we're going to do the exact same thing with CSS. So we're going to click New File and type index.css. Okay, so we have our posts container. And then of course we have our post container for the individual ones. Then we've got post-name. And then we've got post-content. Great. So if we go back to our page, we can go to post container. What's really cool is you can just highlight this and copy it. So we're going to copy that under posts container. Then we're going to grab the CSS that we added for here. We'll do the same thing for our name. And then our content. So now if we refresh our page, it's all back to nothing. That's because we haven't actually included our CSS page here. So we're going to do link rel equals style sheet, href equals index.css. And now we'll refresh our page again. And it works. But you'll notice our body wasn't fixed. So we're going to just type in body. Background color is light gray. Now you'll notice I didn't put a dot or a pound sign for class or ID. The reason why is because if you don't put anything, it just looks for a tag. So it grabs our body tag, changes its background to light gray. Now if we refresh our page, awesome. So we've got our post, we've got our navbar working, we've got the background. The next thing we're going to want is maybe like a like, comment, and share button. So if we go back to our index.html, we can make another div, class equals post buttons container. And then we're going to type in button, class equals like button, like. Then we can just do copy it, paste it, comment. And then we'll have another one for share. And actually, now that I think about it, we're just going to rename these classes to post footer button, since they're all going to look the same anyway. Now if we refresh our page, wow, those buttons don't look good. So we're going to right click the like button and click inspect. And then we're going to go to our post buttons container and type in display flex. So now it's got, because of this display flex, it has all these buttons in this container, but we want to make them take up the entire width. So in each button, we're going to do width 100%, width 100%, then width 100%. Okay, that's looking a little bit better, so we're going to save that. So post buttons container, we're going to add that. Display flex. And then our button is post footer button. And we're going to make those width 100%. And now, because we added the class to all three buttons, this is going to be applied to all three of them. So remember how I said IDs have to be unique? Well, classes don't. And that's sort of the point, is because it has this class, we can apply it to multiple things. So now if we refresh the page, it'll work. If we right click, actually it's already here. So now because we added a class called post footer button, it'll be right here. And as you can see, if I edit one of them, it'll edit all of them. The reason why is because they all have the same class. So the next thing we're going to want to do is set our background color to be transparent. Okay, so it's looking a little better. Border, none. Okay. And then our post buttons container, we're going to have a border, whoops, top, 1 pixel solid black. And then border bottom, 1 pixel solid black. Okay, so let's copy that in there, border top, border bottom, into our post buttons container. And then these two things in our post footer button. Then we'll refresh. Awesome. Now, we do have a slight problem that I don't like. Because we took the route of adding padding to our left side of our post container, it gives padding to these lines, so it doesn't allow them to connect. So instead of adding padding left to our whole container, instead what we could do is add padding left to each one of these things. So for example, I could add padding left to our post name. So for example, I could add padding left here, and then it'll work individually. It's not ideal, but for this one situation, it's sort of what we have to do. So we're going to find this padding left and padding right. We're going to delete them, and then we're going to type in post name. And then if we refresh our page, you'll notice the post name has padding, but this doesn't, which is bad, but the button lines do, which is good. So we also want our post content to have that padding. But what's really cool is we can do comma, type in post padding. So now padding left and padding right will get applied to both post name and post post content. Now if we refresh, cool. Now our post content, we're going to give it a margin bottom 2%. That way they're not so close together. Great. I feel like our buttons are a little bit too close to the lines though. So we're going to try editing one of the buttons, or we're going to try editing the post buttons container. We're going to give it padding bottom 10 pixels, padding top 10 pixels. That looks a little bit much. So that looks good. So we're going to add it to our buttons. Refresh. Okay. Now you're going to notice if you click the button, it's going to show this ugly border, even though we have border set to none on the buttons. And that's because it changes when you actually click it. Luckily, this is a really easy solution. We're going to type post footer button colon focus. And we're going to type outline colon 0 exclamation mark important. And now if we refresh our page, when we click a button, nothing's happening. But we do have a slight problem, and that's that we actually have no way of knowing this is a button now. Like we know, but the person that's looking at it may be a little bit confused. So a good way to fix this problem is when we highlight it, we want to change our mouse cursor to indicate that we're highlighting over top of a button. We want to go back to our CSS, and we want to do post dash footer dash button colon hover, and we're going to change our cursor to be pointer. So now if we refresh our page, we can see that our cursor changes when we highlight these buttons. So that's great. We'll set up functionality for them later. For now, we just want to move on to the next section. So we're going to go to index here. And the next thing we're going to create is a spot where they can type in a new comment. So we're going to type in div class equals post create comment container. And we're going to type in input type equals text, class equals new comment, input. And then we're going to have an image, and we're going to grab an arrow. So I'm just going to go on Google and type in like arrow image. And then I'll just click something like this. Save image as. Then we'll go to our local disk, WAMP64, www. We're going to right click and click new. And we're going to select folder. We're going to make a new folder called images. And then we're just going to name this arrow.png. Okay, so now we've got an arrow. So we're going to do image source equals /images/arrow.png. And now if we refresh our page, we have a text box and we have an arrow. Now in order to make it look good, we're going to want to go to our post create comment container. And we're going to set display to be flex. And then we're going to go to our image. We're going to type width, and we're going to make this like 20 pixels. Maybe a bit longer. 40 seems pretty good. Then we're going to set our input type to be a width of maybe like 80%. And then we want to space them away, so we're going to go our post create comment container. And we're going to go padding left. Let's give it like 3%. Padding top, maybe 2%. Maybe a bit more. We can even go, yeah, 4 is probably good. So then padding bottom, 4%. And then padding right, 3%. Okay, so then now our padding has made it so it's pushed everything a little bit so that it's not so close together. Now we have to go to our image and we need to space it out a little bit. So we're going to go margin left, maybe 3%. 5's fine. And then we want to display these things in the middle. And then we want to make our text box look a little bit better. So we're going to do border radius 10 pixels. Oh, whoops. I did not mean to add the border radius onto our post create comment container. We want to add it onto our text box. Border radius 10 pixels. And then our border is a bit thick, so we're going to set it ourselves to 1 pixel, solid, and then black. 10 pixels might be a bit much. Let's bring it to 5 instead. Cool. So now we don't want to lose what we have here. So I'm going to copy this stuff into our post create comment container. Awesome. Then we want to add the style to our new comment input. That should actually be post new comment input, just to keep things the same. And then we'll change it back here too. And then we're going to have post, class equals post new comment arrow. And then we'll add that here. And then add our properties to it. So margin left 5%, width 40 pixels. Great. And then in our input, we're going to have a placeholder equal to write a comment. Now if we refresh our page, write a comment, and we have our button, and our post is looking a lot better than it was before. But one final thing I want to change is I want to actually make the padding in this a little bit bigger, I think. So we're going to give it a padding of probably about 7 pixels. We can go even up to 8. But then because this gets bigger, it also makes our image grow in height. So we want to set our height just like we set our width. I don't know what it'll be, maybe 25 pixels. No, a little bit. 30 seems fine. So we're going to set our arrow to have a height of 30 pixels. And then our input to have a padding of 8 pixels. And you might be wondering, why didn't I write like padding left or padding right? Well, putting padding just makes it so that it's all of them. But then finally, you'll notice our arrow button is a little higher up. And that's because its height isn't based around the container anymore. We set its height. So what we need to do is we have this display flex. We're going to do justify content, we're going to do align items center. And now it just makes everything in the container go to the very middle part. So make sure you go to post create comment container and align item center. Now if we refresh our page, everything's looking like it's supposed to. So just one last thing. On our image, we're going to give it an on click. And we're going to set that equal to display comment. And this is sort of going to tie into what we had before. So now we're going to have a function called display comment. We're going to do var comment equal document dot get element by ID. ID equals post new comment. So we'll get element by ID post new comment dot value. Whoops. And then if we alert our comment, we should sort of see our earlier JavaScript lesson tied together. This is a new comment. And then there you go. This is a new comment. So now I'm going to show you guys an even better way to do this. So remember, jQuery is JavaScript. It just makes things easier. So instead of doing this document.getElementById, we can just put our $sign and then specify that it's an ID by putting a pound symbol in front of it. And then instead of doing .value, we can do .val and refresh, and it should do the exact same thing. Comment. So rather than using document.getElementById, we're going to be doing this using the jQuery method from now on.